He was an absolutely indispensable employee at an engineering company. Although he developed his department, improved efficiency, reduced costs, and took additional specialized training in his free time, he never really got a raise in 5 years. He received an offer with a 60% salary increase from another firm and resigned. The company immediately made a counteroffer with an 80% increase. The very fact that they knew his worth all this time but didn't want to pay him until they had to infuriated him so much that the peaceful parting turned hostile. He began fiercely poaching their clients, and although his former company still exists, it is now much smaller. Maybe it's not a complete collapse in the full sense of the word, but we had one person who was a close friend of the CEO. He owned so many shares of the company that their sale required board approval and SEC filings. Then the company was bought, and his shares became part of the deal. If he had decided to sell them, it would have severely impacted the stock price. As a result, he was offered any position he wanted. And this guy worked with me. It was impossible to fire him. A few years later, some young, self-confident manager fired him. The reasons were absolutely moronic, essentially the classic, "I don't like his attitude." Instead of replying, you can't fire me," the guy said, "Okay," and applied to sell his shares. I don't know how much he made, but definitely more than $90 million. And he had every right to do so. The board had to approve the deal, he paid taxes, and retired in his 40s. The stock company fell by about 15% that week. The manager was fired, apparently literally kicked in the ass. Since my grandfather died, the quality of asphalt on Oregon roads has noticeably deteriorated. He retired twice, but continued to work as a consultant until his death. After his death, representatives from the road service called my grandmother. According to her, they seemed more devastated than she was after 40 years of marriage. They fired a CEO who really cared about employees and developed the company. The official statement was, "Now we need a person who can manage the company at a new level." In reality, the main investor wanted to put his person in charge. They promised mountains of gold, an IPO, and innovation growth. None of this happened. The new leaders began to burn out everything that made the company great. It got to the point where we were forbidden from sending farewell emails, although it used to be commonplace. Then they tried to bring some things back, but it was too late. Frequent changes in leadership led to complete chaos in strategy. What was considered the flagship product in one year was written off the next. The company still exists, but it is now just a shadow of its former self. Many strong employees understood everything in time and left. This was a person who knew the client, who built relationships with them, who knew the entire history of the clients and the company. He was removed. And what do you think happened? Clients started leaving because they didn't like how they were treated, and there was no one left who could sort things out. We had an employee who had a lot of clients who worked with us exclusively because of him. He was extremely loyal to the company. When another firm tried to poach him, he put forward incredible conditions thinking they would refuse, but they agreed. Unfortunately, loyalty is not forever, and it would have been foolish not to accept an offer with double the salary. The department where he worked never recovered even after 5 years. My cousin's friends in college got a job at a small company in 1982. After a few years, that small company became a corporate giant. The cousin worked in an advertising agency, and they landed this company as a client. The agency grew from $5 million a year in just a couple of years, thanks to one client. The owners of the agency started buying themselves BMWs and houses in prestigious areas, and the cousin got a $10 raise. No bonuses, no premiums. As a result, she decided to leave. They threw her a farewell party with a cake and a card. Another advertising agency hired her with the salary 5 times higher, with bonuses and benefits. The corporate giant briefly informed the first agency, We want to tell you that we are transferring our contract to another agency because we are following her. The shocked agency didn't realize that they got the contract not because they were so cool, but because they hired a friend of the client's top manager. The second agency understood this and had been poaching her for a long time. The cousin liked the people from the first agency, but when the company started, he learned that he could get a great contract for printing and folding instructions for medicines. A huge contract for millions of copies. He knew a person with the right printing press, another with the cutter, and a third with the folder. These machines were idle, so he bought them cheaply, without telling anyone about the contract. He set everything up for continuous printing and hired one highly qualified operator to monitor the entire process. He recouped the investment from the first run and then just raked in the money. Then he sold the business and retired. The new owner saw how one person was servicing the entire process and decided that he was just feeding paper and folding finished products. Clearly, he was being overpaid. He fired him and hired a cheaper worker. But the fired operator did much more. These 3 machines constantly required adjustments. If the paper is slightly off-center, you need to turn one handle. If the folding is not perfect, another lever. Constant monitoring and adjustment, skills that cannot be learned in just a couple of days. The fired operator immediately got a job at another printing house, and everything went wrong for the new owner. The products did not meet the requirements. He lost the contract. This was the main source of income. And soon he destroyed a business that had existed for 45 years. I produce a product that needs a quality bottling cap. During COVID, supplies became tight. I somehow found bottles, although they were of lower quality, but the caps were a nightmare. Then I started calling along the supply chain. Eventually, I reached the owner of the largest factory in the US that produced the caps I needed. And it turned out that the factory was completely closed because there's only one person in Slovakia who knows how to repair and maintain their equipment. But due to COVID, he couldn't come. I asked, with a slight condescending tone in my voice, is there a manual, or maybe there's an option to call this person by a video link? In the end, I ran into a brick wall. Only this person is needed on site. And that's it. We wait. Fortunately, he didn't die and flew to the US 8 weeks later to fix everything. The company Coors has long been producing ceramic laboratory filters. For us, they made an enlarged version of one of the main filters, and it worked great. We wanted to order another one. We placed an order. We were told that person X had retired, and now no one can make filters of that size so that they don't crack. Allegedly, he never managed to train anyone. I don't know if they continue trying, but we eventually switched to another type of filter. Perhaps it was a cocktail. I read this story a long time ago, but unfortunately, I can't find the original, so I'll retell it from memory. There was one guy who worked in a sausage factory, like a hot dog factory. His task was simple: to roll carts of sausages from the production shop to the smokehouse. At some point, this process was automated and he was fired. But suddenly, the quality of the products deteriorated sharply. The taste and texture changed. No one understood what the matter was. It turned out that the time it took for this person to roll the carts to the smokehouse was critical to the entire process. Then he was rehired and told to roll the carts along a winding corridor to simulate the old route. As soon as he started, the taste and texture returned. When he finally retired, an automated system had to be created that repeated his route with the required delay. This system was named after him. Not exactly a collapse, but almost a critical system failure. A new team of managers came in and began to review the cost of external contracts and the payment of third-party labor. They discovered an annual payment to some guy in the West of $20,000 a year. They started punching information in the wrong people and decided that this was an unnecessary expense. They canceled the payment and terminated the contract. It turned out that this person was an expert in some ancient code on which one of the company's critical systems worked. It has long been outdated, but is still actively used. Like in those memes where the entire global infrastructure rests on one forgotten piece of software. The IT department didn't know about this. No one asked them. And when they found out, they immediately said, "Without him, we're doomed." The management quickly wrote a check and returned him to the contract. In one of the companies, we had an employee who brought in the largest client in history, Ford Motor Company. Ever heard of it? A software supply contract worth $22 million. As soon as the contract was signed, he was fired under a trumped-up pretext, not a team player. They didn't want to pay him a percentage of this deal. Since then, the company has not been able to attract any major clients, and 6 months later, mass layoffs began. I hope he sued those bastards. No, he didn't sue. He accepted everything with dignity, shook hands with everyone at the farewell party that we organized at our own expense. The company didn't give a cent. His behavior only emphasized how dirty and unfair the situation was. As for the suit, there was no point in it. The company quickly spent all the money from the contract on current expenses. I think he understood that. LOL, yeah, that was me. I got a job at a plastic factory, started as a forklift driver. Then I learned how to make mixtures, work with machines, service equipment. A little later, I was promoted to technical support, then to shift supervisor, and then to plant manager. The factory was sold. The new owner fired everyone, changed everything. Tried to get me back, but with a salary 25% lower than before. I told him to go to hell. A week later, he called again and offered the old salary. I said I'd come back for a 10% raise. He hung up. The next week, he called again and agreed. It was very shitty working under his leadership. In the end, he finally got to me and stated that I don't know what I'm doing. I turned around and left. He shouted after me that I'm nobody and they'll find a replacement before I leave the parking lot. A couple weeks later, former colleagues started calling and saying that everything is going haywire. The factory closed in 6 months. It turned out that I was that irreplaceable person and I didn't even know it. I worked in an SME company, outsourced IT, and I was about the 4th employee. After 2 years, there were about 15 of us. The company had a lot of well-paying clients, and I knew all the details about each of them. My job was to go to each client once a week and do whatever they needed in terms of IT. Move mail to the cloud? Done. Reset Karen's password? Done. Change the toner in the printer? Please. I was a universal specialist. Before I arrived, this work was done by the 2 founders of the company, but hiring me, they went into the administrative part to grow. I liked my job. I didn't sit in the same office every day. I had a concurrent van, a corporate card for gasoline, and the freedom to manage my own schedule. Over time, there were too many clients. One of me was not enough. They started hiring other specialists, but I was still the most experienced. About 2 years later, a friend from AWS contacted me and suggested submitting a resume. I applied and got an offer. My current salary was about $42,000 a year, and Amazon offered $80,000 plus a bonus of $20,000, help with relocation and shares. I agreed and left. After 8 months, the MSP company collapsed. Clients were dissatisfied with the work of other specialists. One of the founders tried to do my job himself and realized how much I was doing. He told his partner that they needed to hire 3 people to replace me. He replied that there was no money. Complaints began. One of the founders left, and in less than a year, the company closed. The second partner moved to California and became a sommelier. I had no idea that my leaving would be the beginning of the end of an entire company. There's even an official term for this, the bus factor. How many employees can a bus hit before the company ceases to function? LOL, this was my father. He was the lead software engineer for the largest client. The company he worked for was engaged in automated equipment and cooperated with one large glass corporation. They just adored him. Then the corporate management removed the general manager of the branch, and my father had a bad feeling about the new management. He quit. The client was lost within 6 months. The branch closed within less than a year. My boss, the head of the department, I was a front-end developer in a small and miserable marketing agency. My boss was not only the only back-end specialist, but was also responsible for the client base, for monthly phone mailings, and for the entire server where files were stored. When he left, I started coming to work just like that. I wasn't given any tasks. And soon, the agency fell apart. I was that person. I worked for a company that serviced high-rise buildings, maintenance, repair, and so on. I was part of a 4-person team that calculated costs, financial analysis of contracts with works across the country. We were bought by a competitor who wanted to acquire our specializations and gain a foothold on the West Coast. My team moved to another competitor and didn't say a word to me. I was left alone, and I pulled it all myself for almost a year. All this time telling the management that it is necessary to hire new people, but no one was hired. I tried to take vacation so I wouldn't burn out, but I was refused with the words, "You can't be replaced." I quit. According to recent data, the company is losing contracts. I attribute this to the fact that they failed to force any other department to do what I and my former team did. Answering the question, they lost many years of knowledge